The Mechanic of Consciousness by Venerable Rungruong Papasaro, Dr. Rungruong Limchopatipa. The stream of consciousness represents is an active being, therefore consciousness is subject to origination, and is subject to cessation in life all the time. However, since it is happening so fast that we usually do not realize of it. Now with the advanced modern equipment like fMRI, neuroscientists try to detect such brain activities in streaming images to study the signal processing when having consciousness of the central nervous system. In 2003, Richard Davidson and Antoine Lutz conducted a very interesting scientific study by using the fMRI to investigate on the brain activities of several Buddhist monks with many years of experiences in Buddhist practice. This study finds out the differences of brain activities between baseline laypersons and well-trained Buddhist monks, and they conclude that
the person with meditation practice shows gamma oscillations in the brain activities with large amplitude, highly synchronized and lasted for many minutes. We can see that a person with meditation practice shows a different pattern of brain activities, and it suggests that the brain is really plastic that we can change in a very objective way.
Note: the gamma brainwaves have the highest frequency among all brainwaves. They are associated with high levels of thought and focus. This is the type of wave pattern that indicates the mind has the mindfulness in the high level of thought and the concentration in the high level of focus together when being conscious. They can have different effects depending on their levels in the brain. Then they further trace the brain activities with fMRI to reveal that in each round of consciousness, there is certain operating routine of 4 stages including mind wandering, awareness, reorientation of attention, and sustaining attention or concentration, respectively. Richard Davidson summarizes the mechanic of consciousness as follows.
In each cycle of having consciousness, the mind follows these following steps, starting with the first step of mind wandering, stage which is sometimes defined as a pre-consciousness, that is, being in state of readiness to capture any new incoming mental phenomenon, or signal. Then the mind will consolidate the incoming signals by releasing the current mental phenomenon and then switching for a new incoming mental phenomenon. After then, the mind will shift to become aware of the new arrival object of consciousness stage. And then having mindfulness with attention in reorientation of attention stage to align the attention on a new object of consciousness. And then the mind will be in sustaining attention or concentration stage, which is focusing on the captured object of consciousness for a while.
In this experiment, apparently both the mindfulness and concentration are inherited capability of mind to understand the incoming stimuli from the world, but this inherited capabilities are too weak to be able to capture what is happening inside the mind. In this circumstance, during the Buddhist practice, the Buddha sharpened both the quality of mindfulness and concentration to be powerful and sensitive enough to be aware of what is happening inside the mind in insight observation. The early development of Buddhist practice is focused on the faculty and power improvement of both mindfulness and concentration in the 37 factors for enlightenment. Amazingly, the Buddha discovered the special acknowledge element of mind to be used in the insight observation and introspective learning development to understand the truths of life within nature, even without the modern equipment. The analogy to the description of the mechanic of consciousness in Buddhist philosophy is to be compared like a person sleeping under a mango tree. When having consciousness, the mind will fetch a particular dominated signal as an object of consciousness, like the person wakes up and eat a mango fruit. And when the consciousness fades away, then it is compared like the person falls asleep. This repeated pulse pattern of consciousness in on and off of consciousness generates a stream of consciousness that we call life. As a matter of fact, life is just a natural process that we can observe it as the process of dependent origination. Therefore, life is no self. The routine of the stream of consciousness can be described as follows.
Dependent to the passing away of the previous object of consciousness arises a new object of consciousness. Dependent to the new object of consciousness arises mind wandering of the incoming object of consciousness. Dependent to the mind wandering of the incoming object of consciousness arises mindfulness to be aware of the object of consciousness. Dependent to the establishing of mindfulness arises reorientation of attention to the new object of consciousness. Dependent to the reorientation of attention arises the state of concentration. When the object of consciousness passed away, the mind fetches a new object of consciousness, and starting a new routine of consciousness.
This scientific experiment is very interesting because it explains that consciousness is the subroutine of mind processing starting from mind wandering, then awareness, mindfulness, and then end with focusing with concentration. And this subroutine will keep on functioning as long as the person is alive as stream of consciousness. In an ancient time, seeing this Dharma and performing insight observation is something very abstract, and it is very difficult to explain to any other third-party person. However, with an advance in neuroscience and fMRI, we now can understand the inside of what is happening in the central nervous system. The mind of collective neuron network is a parallel processing with consciousness functioning as a main routine of the dynamic core connecting to all the other clusters of neuron network. The consciousness will transmit signals back and forth to every clusters within the nervous system reflecting the process of dependent origination. The receiving signal is an object of consciousness, while the sending signal is an induction of the other state development, and the whole picture of this system of mind can be described as the process of dependent origination as follows.
Dependent on name and form, arises external sense objects, stimulus, arriving to sense organs of 6 sense bases. Dependent on 6 sense bases arises contact. And dependent on contact arises feeling. Dependent on feeling arises craving. Dependent on craving arises clinging. Dependent on clinging arise becoming in existence. Dependent on becoming in existence arises birth. Dependent on birth arises decay and death. Dependent on decay and death arise ignorance. Dependent on ignorance arise volitional formations. Dependent on volitional formations arise consciousness as a being which consists of name and form. Dependent on consciousness arise name and form. And the process keeps on going. This is the Dharma of the process of dependent origination. Those who see the process of dependent origination, then they see the Buddha, and seeing the Buddha is to see the process of dependent origination.
Note: the consciousness in this context is a being which consists of name and form. Life is a continuance, stream, of consciousness in the process of dependent origination, and since the consciousness arises and passes away all the time, therefore any object of consciousness reflecting an associated state of mind also arises and passed away at the same time of consciousness. And this is the main reason why every mental phenomenon, no matter consciousness and its associated state of mind together, arises and passes away in nature, and as the mind keeps on executing this routine, as the stream of consciousness, the varieties of states of mind will keep on changing. Conclusively, every phenomena inside the mind are impermanent, deteriorating, and no self as a natural process. The operating routine of the arising and fading away of consciousness is happening all the time when being alive, but most of us may not notice it, and we focus only on the emotional states of mind. What drives in everyday life is mostly the emotional object of consciousness, and we simply flow into the matter involving with craving, clinging, and ignorance in the process of dependent origination. In Buddhism, it is the knowledge to understand the cause and effect of how the mind function that leads the way to enlightenment, to gain knowledge to develop the mind, to maneuver the mind rightly. In every round of consciousness, there are slight portions of both the mindfulness to be aware of an object of consciousness and the concentration to focus on an object of consciousness, so that the consciousness will be able to have a clear understanding of what is happening in the world. In simple words, the quality of consciousness in performing a function of being alive depends on 2 qualities of mind, namely the sensitivity of mindfulness and the stability of concentration. The Buddha discovered a closed relationship between mindfulness and concentration in consciousness, that when having consciousness, by establishing mindfulness with careful attention on Dharma as its object, and keeping the object of Dharma continually present to the mind. Then the mind will abandon an unwholesomeness, and then the mind becomes internally steadied, composed, unified, and concentrated. This is a foundation of the Buddhist meditation where the mindfulness leads to a concentration, and in the meantime the concentration also improves the quality of mindfulness along the Buddhist practice as well. As a matter of fact, the Buddha was the first one who discovered the combination of mindfulness and concentration to be used for insight observation, which was the foundation of Buddhist practice.